Hello, everyone. Today, joining me is Ken Bannister, one of the leading experts on lubrication. And today we will be chatting about practical lubrication for industrial facilities, which is also the title of the new fourth edition of his book. Hi, Ken, and welcome.
Thank you, Anna.
So, as an expert in industrial lubrication, what motivated you to write practical lubrication for industrial facilities?
Well, I've been writing in this area for many years, going back I guess 30 some years was the first book I published in lubrication for industry, which is an introduction text, basically amounted to a 4 to 5 hour read that you could basically read in one sitting, which a lot of people did and have told me they have done so. But it only broke the surface in terms, it was like an introduction to lubrication. And that book is still being sold today quite well, actually. And after 30 some years and just two editions. And so I wanted to write a much more comprehensive text in lubrication, like a soup to nuts all the way through. So multiple different types of practitioners and a practical book as well, not just a theoretical book, but more for the practical aspect of how people will use lubrication and develop a lubrication management program moving forward. So, and I wanted like a single point reference guide that would be like a blueprint for that. And we're talking for people like engineers, mechanical trades, students, apprentices, research engineers, lots of different types of persons, just lubricators themselves. Some of these people have never had any formal or informal education as to how to lubricate, just been placed into the job. There's a grease gun, off you go. Damage what you can. In other words, is what they're being told without realizing it. And the research has shown that I've looked at in terms of what the actual training on the field of lubrication, lubricants and their use and the fundamental aspects of tribology and such, and surface interaction, is rarely more than 20 hours in an 8,000 hour training program for engineers or for tradespeople. That is abominable when you actually think of the amount of impact that lubrication has on all interacting moving parts, mechanical parts. It is just phenomenal in terms of how people lack the understanding in that area. So, and it's a subject that touches and influences every element of industry on our daily lives. And so I wanted to write something in that respect that would be easy to read, kind of compelling, if you can make it, it is a compelling subject, and I tried to make it more so, and as well as put the technical side in there. So it'd be like, as I said, a one single point reference guide moving forward.
And so this is the fourth edition. So what are some of the key updates and revisions that have been made in this edition of the book compared to the previous ones?
Actually, quite a lot of changes in different ways. It's been almost completely rewritten and made over. It used to be a 2-column book, and now it's a single column book, so it's much easier to read. It's now in full color, which color really does make things pop off the page, and it makes it much more interesting to read as a result. And I'm really excited at seeing the book in color and stuff. It's written in a less formal language, so it's written in an easier to read style for most of the books, and it's much easier to navigate. It now only has it's broken down into 7 major sections and flows naturally from a lubrication fundamental right up to the certification program at the end, being certified. So I took a lot of the non-relevant items out, sort of the out-of-date specifications for lubricants that really serve no relevance anymore, which it may have done in the previous editions, but no longer. So I took these superfluous elements out of the book and tried to make it more meaningful. So it's had a full makeover. It's now meant to be read to understand as well as to reference. I think it's much more studying and learner friendly. Mm-hmm. That was the aim.
Yeah. So speaking about lubrication in general, what are some common misconceptions or challenges that people or corporations face when it comes to implementing effective lubrication management programs?
Good question. Okay, so there's a lot of common misconceptions about lubrication. We still have what I would term an agrarian approach, or Victorian approach, if you will, to that anyone can lubricate. Oil is oil, grease is grease. What's the big deal? As long as you slap some in there, that's fine, right? And it doesn't matter as long as it gets some oil of some sort. Well, it's a lack of respect for the field of lubrication in essence. And it's fairly new because it's only from the 60s that Peter Jost actually put a name to it, which is tribology, the science of interacting surfaces. It goes back as far as Leonardo da Vinci, who did lots of actual experiments in this area and wrote a lot of treatise on that. But in terms of common knowledge, it's only when Peter Joss brought it in terms of how much money that the United Kingdom was losing due to ineffective lubrication practices did it become really an issue, and that people stood up and started to take attention to. When we're looking at it, the world actually runs on 4 microns of lubrication. And that's 4 microns. A hair is 20 microns or so. It's about a fifth of the diameter of a hair. And that's what separates two interacting surfaces ideally. And
Mhm.
that's the field that we're trying to deal with, to get lubricant into that surface. And if you put more lubricant in, you'll get fluid friction losses, and that will cause premature failure. If you don't put enough lubricant in, you'll get mechanical friction losses, and that will cause premature failure. And those failures can be very, very expensive in many, many different ways, in terms of downtime, in terms of machine repair, in terms of the losses in many different areas. And but once you understand lubrication, it's not that difficult to manage and maintain a 4 micron film. I just want to give you, and this is on a daily basis, like for instance, you this morning probably came to work in a car or in public transport. You may, if you've been to an airport lately, you may have been onto a walking or moving an elevator, or you've moved on a walking platform that moves along escalators. All of those elements come in terms of, now you've moved into the building. Now the building is heated and it's cooled. There's lots of motors and pumps that are working inside that building to perform that. So on a day-to-day basis, everything we touch and everything we use, we don't realize that we're running. It's all running on 4 microns of lubrication, and that's how important. But we sure do miss it when the elevator doesn't work, or a car doesn't start because there's a mechanical problem within it, or it's the aircraft doesn't fly that day because there's some mechanical issue with the plane that was lubricated and now it's not working, has to be replaced, or the walkway doesn't work. Lots of different things in our life become miserable when mechanical machines don't operate as they should, and it's all 80-90% of it comes down to lubrication and effective lubrication practices to keep that going.
Mhm. So being specific and precise is vital. But how do you see the ISO 55001 as management standard and the ICML 55 World Lubrication Standard influencing the field of industrial lubrication?
Well, we got 55,000 probably about 10, 12 years ago, I believe it was. And I was heavily involved in that area as well. That's basically managing assets. It's about asset management. Where it differed from past 55 publicly available specification that came out of the UK, 55, which was machine centric, this now became holistic, in as much as it's looking at how everything that's in the corporation is an asset. So if it adds value, it becomes an asset. And that includes people, that includes machines, that includes documentation, that includes the building that you operate through, everything that has value. And so those are all determined as assets. And one of the things so that is fantastic to me. I mean, that's understanding and giving a value to everything that you deal with and you touch within the organization, including the people in your interactions with one another. All of those add value, and it's excellent to recognize that if we want to move forward and improve ourselves. But one of the elements that was touched on very, very, very lightly and hardly at all was lubrication. Considering that lubrication is responsible for, or ineffective lubrication is responsible up to 70% of all bearing failures out in the world today, and for the slowdown of equipment, for the massive loss of energy, and then the environmental impact of continually changing lubricants out and getting rid of old lubricants, not cleaning them up. None of that was paid attention to in this standard. So the ICML, which is the International Council for Machinery Lubrication, is an international body centered in the USA. Its mandate is to basically to improve the world through improved lubrication practices. And one of the things that the 55.1 standard has done, which will be available probably at the end of this year, that actually River Publishers already has this. There you go, already has the standard issued. And there are 3 books in that standard, and there's soon to be 55.3, which is the auditor's handbook that comes along with that. We're on track right now to actually put out the corporate standard early 2025. So that's really exciting in that regard. But what 55 is doing now is aligning all the elements that come under lubrication in the lubrication management program, so people understand the benefits of good lubrication practices and how they align and bridge into 55,000, utilizing ISO 9000, which is the quality management standard, ISO 14,000, which is the environmental standard. And all of those elements now come to combine, because lubrication really has a big impact on all of those three elements of the three standards, the good use of those standards and the benefits that you can gain from them, as well as the machines, as well as your energy consumption, as well as your costs, controlling your costs. So it only makes sense to truly understand about lubrication to be certified in, so you fully understand the impact of it.
Yeah. So we talked about the audience for the book. You said engineers, technicians, students. So how does the book approach the balance between theoretical knowledge of lubrication principles and practical application in real-world industrial settings?
Okay, so first of all, this is not a tribology book. Okay, it doesn't go into all the levels of interaction between two moving surfaces. It more or less talks about the practical application, and it is a practical lubrication for industrial facilities. So it talks about the industrialization requirement for lubrication and good practice within that field. And so it starts with the fundamentals and lubrication fundamentals to understand about friction, about fluid friction, and about the basic elements that we need to know about that film of lubrication, and how thin it is, and how we affect it by the application of lubricants, whether it be how different it is for oil versus grease, and how both fluids work in different ways, and what you can do, how you apply those, how you can tell if they're doing well or if they're not, how you look at lubricants themselves to ensure that the lubricants are fit for use, and also about controlling contamination, which is what kills lubricants, and also about waste, and about managing that waste afterwards into what's good for the environment. So it breaks all them down into easy to understand concepts. And it's about the practical application and management of lubricants and their delivery. And realistically, what it comes down to is for the 4 R's, which is the right lubricant in the right place, at the right amount, at the right time. And how do you go about getting that and applying that?
Mm-hmm. And so you're seeing the increasing focus on sustainability and environmental responsibility. How does your book address the role of lubrication management in minimizing environmental impact and promoting sustainable practices within industrial facilities?
Okay, so we're all familiar with like lubricant spills and what must happen to, well, so what happens to all of that stuff afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And so there's an after effect of a lubricant spill, or if a machine is leaking. Often machine leaks are handled not by looking at where the root cause of the leak is coming from, whether it be a seal or a worn pieces, or through excess vibration. We tend to put a band-aid fix on things, which is to put a big bucket underneath it and catch the lube. And some people even pour the old lube back into, which is a huge no-no. But it's really is a band-aid repair, and it becomes for accidents. It can really cause big problems to slip on it, or to for physical accidents. But also we've got to get rid of that oil afterwards. So it's much better to actually look at how do we contain that lubricant within the machine and keep it in the machine, and how do we go about so as we can actually maybe clean it while it's in the machine, draw it out, filter it, put it back into the machine, so we don't have to keep replacing that lubricant, so we don't tax the system with old used lubricants sometimes. But if we have to do it, we have to change the oil, because not all oil lasts forever, and it certainly doesn't. It has a specific life cycle, and we try to maintain that life cycle, at least reach the achievable life cycle, and sometimes we can keep it going longer even. But when it does exhaust itself, it really needs to be until we look at what can we do to put it back into the system. So it could be reconstituted, it can be cleaned and reconstituted by some specialists that are out there. So, but we have to keep them separated. You can't mix, once you mix two lubricants, it is now waste oil. So we're trying, in the book, it goes and describes the difference between used oil and waste oil. Waste oil is a really bad thing, and it's classified as contaminated, and it has to be dealt as such, and it's a hazardous material at that point. Used oil is not. It's reusable. It can be reconstituted and cleaned. And so if we teach people in, the book is giving advice on how to keep those collectively apart and how to set up the program to manage those at the back end. So it's about handling and storage. It's about the environmental impacts of, we talk about the environmental impacts. We look at how we can do less lubrication changes and lessen that impact. And of course, then it reduces cost, and it reduces many things, many burdens on the corporation as a result.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about the future, how do you envision the future of industrial lubrication management evolving? Any insights or upcoming developments in the field of industrial lubrication?
I'm really excited in one area, and it's the IIoT, the Industrial Internet of Things. Up until now, lubrication systems have generally been on their own little control systems. Sometimes they're mechanically linked. So many actions of a machine or a piston will activate the pump. So it counts to 20 cycles, and then it will activate a charge, and then we can lessen or increase the charge of lubricant by an adjustment within the piston itself. But those are all mechanical adjustments. We went to timers, and we went to counters. So we count. So for instance, on chain lubrication, we would say on a massive big power-free conveyor system for automotive, carrying cars and stuff like that, we would count the number of links, and every time somebody linked, then we would shoot lubricant into the for one full rotation of the lubrication, the chain itself. That's still on a counter, and it's still basing on a timer or stuff like that. So now we're tying them into computers, and every so many actions of the machine it counts, and then it fires off a charge. But I think we need to be more intelligent about it. And now with the advent of artificial intelligence, that's really coming to the forefront now. It gives us a chance to write programs that are highly intelligent, especially when we've got the industrial Internet of Things linked up, where machines are linked up through various sensors at different points. So where we've got a mechanical interaction point, we can put a sensor. Now, we may already have a vibration sensor in place there, and we're sensing that vibration at points. So what we need to do, we need to look at based on temperature, which is easily to monitor. We look at vibration, we look at the load that's on the machine at that time, and we look at the time of use, the number of times it's been used in terms of, or actions that it's been placed on it. And we can write a program that looks at that then manages the amount of lubricant that is going to be discharged, and based on the state of the lubricant, when that lubricant should be changed. So it's continually monitoring what that is like, and when it needs to be changed or needs to be filtered, so it automatically gets filtered offline. That's what I'm envisioning, a lubrication system of the future. And I'm really, really excited because I don't think it's that far off. So there's a challenge to all the lubricant delivery system manufacturers out there. There's a challenge for you to come up with something on that and be first to market on it.
Yeah, that is very exciting. So what advice would you offer to engineers, maintenance professionals, and lubrication practitioners who are looking to optimize their lubrication management practices?
Okay, so let me just preface that by stating that most people really still are shy about lubrication, engineers and practices, and they haven't been they haven't been immersed in the field of lubrication in so much as they need to be to understand that the benefits that can be handled from that. So I'll give you a simple instance where a manufacturer has taken something at the very, very high end of something, and is engineered using the lubricant as an engineered product. Like most of us, and there's a lot of petrol heads out there, and there's a lot of people who like Formula One racing, and especially in Europe. And now it's becoming really big and exciting in North America since Vegas was added on to the calendar. But in their cars there, which reach speeds of 300, well over 300 kilometers an hour, they have a 1.6 liter turbo engine, which is typically the size of a large. That's typically the size of a car engine in Europe. Mostly at the higher end, mid to higher end. That's a very, very small engine in North America for the distance we go. But that 1.6 turbo engine is putting out 1,000 horsepower. And that is absolutely incredible. And at up to 15,000 RPM, and running at speeds of 300 kilometers an hour plus, or well over 200 miles an hour, on a continued base for 2 hours, all out, in a racing situation. Now, we can't all have those engines because they're worth $10.5 million each. That's what they pay for those engines. And they're very specially made. But what they've done is they've concentrated on the lubricant side of it. And the lubricants have made it so as they can get the limits and fits of that engine so close, and with requiring just understanding that only 4 microns are required between the interconnecting surfaces. They've made a massive difference in terms of the smaller engine putting out massive amounts of inputted power. Now, reliability is not always a factor there, but when it comes to normal engines manufacture, we now have from what was in the 70s and 80s in North America, where we had 440 cubic inches, like 6-liter engines that were putting out 300, 325, 350 horsepower. And if we were lucky, and that was right at the top end. Now we have cars that are putting that out with 2-liter engines, which are driving with incredible reliability that we never had before, because we've used lubricant engineering. And they went down from a 10W30 oil to a 0.5 or a 0.10. So much so that it's important to use the right kind of oil, because it's much, much thinner in terms of its viscosity, because we're using much, much closer fits. So we don't want to cause viscous drag or to cause fluid friction with the moving parts, that it will affect the warranty if you use the wrong oil. So that's how important oil has become, and machinery, and it's becoming more and more coming that way. We're starting to understand we have less redundancy in machinery now. It's being built for a one-time use only, but for reliability to run a certain length of time on that reliability. And lubricants are becoming much more integral as an engineering piece. So I think people need to invest in that more, and to invest in the field of lubrication and their knowledge of that. Just to give you an idea in terms of, from a management perspective, understanding that, like, for instance, if a company has $1 million in sales, or a salesperson brings $1 million sale into play, most companies operate on a 5% after-tax profit, Raj, and that's reasonably good for a company. Some may go up to 7%, some may 10%, but on average, around 5%. That's equivalent to $50,000. So a $50,000 savings in the maintenance of the equipment and the uptime and so on and so forth, and the throughput and the quality of product, a $50,000 savings is equal to $1 million in sales. So if you look at how much money we spend on energy, and if we can reduce that energy, but we've proven that we can prove it just by use of synthetics, we can go from anywhere from 4% to 18% reduction in energy. Just by setting up the lubrication delivery program correctly, we can get up to 20% savings on energy and on machine downtime, less machine downtime. These are all proven. I've actually performed those for energy companies and done those studies with them for the hydro companies. And we're looking at also at improved life cycle, less lubricants to purchase. And on average, a purchase order is probably around $350 to put a purchase order through the system. The less times you have to buy oil, the less money you're saving on the purchasing and handling and process. And all of those elements are all secondary, but they all add up to huge amounts of profit, because they all come off the bottom line. I mean, I would think that any any executive director would be clamoring, why aren't we on this lubrication bandwagon right now? And that's hopefully what we're trying to do. And we go through this. And I'll just give you an instance of where a massive saving was incurred. A number of years ago, I did some work for an oil company it's an oil and gas company. And these are on the gas fields with these massive big compressors, these gas compressors. And this particular company had 10 of them in action that were working. And every year they would take each one down for a week. That's a week's loss of production to actually change the oil and clean the units and everything else. Now, because it is an oil company, they favored their own lubricant in this particular case, and they thought it would be cheaper. They're saving like $140,000 because they're using their own lubricant. I asked them, why are you using that lubricant? And that's because, well, we have it available, and it's cheap, so it's but it's not the right lubricant. And I put forward to them to use a synthetic and to perform a trial on the synthetic oil, which was not theirs. And this is the right kind of oil. They weren't manufacturing that oil at the time. So we did that, and then we actually took it so as we felt that they could go 3 years without an oil change. So they did it for 2 years without an oil change. So they skipped a year on the oil change. And so that's 10 weeks of downtime on 10 compressors that they actually saved, which amounted to something like $20 million for a $140,000 oil change. Well, it cost them $1.4 million to change the oil, difference on the 10 compressors, and they saved 20 some million dollars. So the payback on that was massive. But that's, again, that's not for every particular, but just to show you that every company, every household can make major savings by doing effective lubrication practices. And that's the purpose of the book.
What key takeaway or message do you hope the readers will carry forward into their professional practices and endeavors?
One sentence: lubrication matters. That's it. Lubrication matters. Understand it, and you will understand how and why it matters so much. And it will change the way you design your equipment. It will change the way you operate your equipment, and you will gain an immense amount of not only satisfaction out of it, but also you will impact the environment. You will impact your corporate bottom line significantly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ken. It was really informative. So I will link the book, Practical Lubrication for Industrial Facilities, 4th edition, in the description, and make sure to check it out. Thank you.
Thank you.